Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. Creepy Christmas, submitted by Chloe 10. A few years ago, my family did something we don't normally do. We traveled for Christmas. Most of the time we just stayed in our town with family, and we live in South Carolina. But my father's best friend, I'll call him Uncle Dave, had a place on Nantucket, and the thought of maybe seeing some snow or at least colder weather than what we were used to, it seemed like a really cool way to spend the holiday. Getting there was a pain in the ass, but that's not what the story is about. If you've never been to Nantucket, it's a really cool place. I've been back since then in the summer, and it's a lot more fun in the warmer weather, but it was kind of neat in the winter too. We were lucky to actually have some snow, but it wasn't like crazy snow that we were told that we were going to see. Uncle Dave's place was not near downtown Nantucket. It was kind of off the beaten path, as a lot of the houses are out there. It was a huge house, as many of the houses are near the shoreline areas. Yeah, Uncle Dave had a lot of money. So it was my parents, me, my younger brother, and I was 15 and he was 13, Uncle Dave, Aunt Jenny, and my cousins Lisa and Julie. We got there 2 days before Christmas, and it was a ton of fun just exploring and going down to the beach and seeing how much different it was than the beach we had down in North Myrtle Beach. On Christmas Eve, we all had dinner, and while we were eating, I noticed something over the shoulder of my little brother. I'll call him Stephen. He was sitting with his back towards a bay window in the dining room of Uncle Dave's house. And what I saw was two men standing there. Uncle Dave was a very well-known person on the island, so I thought maybe it was some of his friends that were coming over to say hi or wish everyone Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. So when I said, "Hey, who are those guys?" and pointed towards the window, everyone turned, including my Uncle Dave. He just said, "I have no idea." He and my dad both got up and went to the back door to see what was going on. By the time they got out there, no one was around, and in the time that they were doing that, none of us kept our eyes off the window. They came back in and said, "Oh, maybe it was just some deer that you saw." Believe it or not, Nantucket has a pretty serious deer overpopulation problem. I said, no, it looked like two men, but everyone just said it probably wasn't, and that was that. We went back to dinner, and we had a really fun night. We also got to open one present before we went to bed. That was always our tradition. I got a new artwork book as I was really into and still am into graphic design, so I stayed up late looking at it with the light from my iPhone. My brother and I were sharing a room, and he was asleep. That's when I heard some tapping at the window. We were on the second floor of Uncle Dave's house, and no other lights were on, and almost everyone else was asleep. I did hear my dad go to the bathroom, and that was the last sound I heard as I looked through my book. I turned my iPhone off and went over to the window and then looked out. The windows were on the same side of the house where I thought I saw the guys earlier, or the deer, or whatever. As I stood there was another loud tink on the glass, and I realized somebody was throwing pebbles or stones at the window. I backed up and woke my brother up, and he came over to the window with me, and I told him what was going on. Just as I finished telling him what I was hearing, there was another tink on the window. We were both kind of freaked out because there was no rain or snow or anything like that. It wasn't even windy at that point of night. I asked if we should go down and get Mom and Dad, and Stephen said, "Well, why don't we just go downstairs and see if we can see something?" Doing the dumbest thing we could, we went downstairs to look out the windows to see if anyone was out there, or if maybe there was some wind that we just didn't notice. When we got downstairs and looked out the windows, there was nothing to see, just the open field between Uncle Dave's house and his neighbor, who was about a football field away. As we stood there in the dark, we heard some strange noise in the kitchen. There was a back door from the house outside in the kitchen, and it sounded like someone was shaking the doorknob. Instead of going to get help from my dad or uncle, Stephen and I just both slowly walked into the kitchen to see if we could see what was going on. There was a shape at the back door that was darker than the dark sky behind it, and again I was sure this was a man, this was no deer. I told Stephen to quietly go get Dad, and I would stay in the doorway of the dining room to the kitchen watching this figure. At this point, I wasn't really that scared. I can't explain why. I should have been terrified. Some creepy person trying to break into the house while we were all asleep should have made me unbelievably scared. I listened as Stephen went upstairs, and I moved closer to the door as the person on the other side continued to mess with the doorknob. When I got up close, the person stopped as they must have seen me standing there, and I never really got a clear look at who it was. But whoever it was put both of his hands on the window panes of the back door and said in a pretty loud and rough voice, "Merry Christmas, little girl. Open the door for Santa." I froze and didn't say a word, and a few seconds later my dad and Uncle Dave came running down the stairs. The person on the other side of the door took off, and both my uncle and dad pushed me aside and went out the door to see if they could find what was going on. They didn't find anything, but they did follow a pair of footsteps and some freshly fallen snow up to the road, but that's where the trail ended. When they came back, they flipped on the lights in the kitchen where the person had put their hands on the window panes of the back door were actually 2 smeared bloody handprints. Uncle Dave called the police, and they said they would send someone out, and when they got there, everyone was now wide awake and wondering what the heck was going on. I told them what I had seen and what the person had said, and Stephen had said that he had also heard the things that were hitting our window, and also about how he had seen someone outside the door. There wasn't much more that they could do as the handprints were very smeared, so they said that they would keep checking on the house throughout the night, but we needed to just be very vigilant and call if anything else happened. Thankfully, nothing did, and we did enjoy the rest of our time through the holidays. It's funny how things get quickly forgotten when you're having a good time, but the truth is, every night I wondered if that person, whoever it was, would come back. No one else in my family seemed to think it was a big deal, and I tried to play it off as not a big deal too. But any funny noise at night or any creak in the house made me think that whoever thought he was Santa was coming back. This year we're just staying home, and Uncle Dave and Aunt Jenny and my cousins are visiting us. I really hope that no Santa tries to get into our house. Merry Christmas to you, Uncle Josh, and to all of your listeners. A Big Mistake, submitted by Johnson & Johnson. When I was in college, I got a job bartending at a local joint to make some extra scratch. It was a lot of fun, early 2000s at that point. I lived off campus with some friends, and Dead Week was usually the second week of December with everyone studying and getting ready for final exams. And the last day of school was like December 20th or something. My senior year, my boss at the bar asked if I could stay working until the night before Christmas Eve. All of my friends were going home before that, and I had stayed back before to work. When school was in session, it was mainly a student bar, but when everyone went home, it turned into a townie bar, which was okay, but just different. Totally different type of music, but I had fun. So I was just working every night till 2 a.m. because I didn't have to go to classes, and my boss had left for Florida and gave me the keys and told me to manage the bar, the other bartenders and barbacks. No sweat. The last night was pretty slow, but around midnight, this townie woman came in, totally typical. Super tight, shiny black spandex pants and a short top. She took her coat off and sat down, and I got her a Long Island iced tea. And we got to talking, and pretty soon everyone was leaving. Like I said, there wasn't a lot of action. It was so close to the holiday. She said her name was Tara. I'm pretty sure that was a lie, which I would find out was. And she was in her late 30s, I'd say. Around 1, she was the only customer, and I decided to call it a night and close early. By now it was just me and Tony, a great barback, and I told him to take off, Merry Christmas, and I'd see him in the New Year. Tara stayed on her stool. I offered her one more, but she just looked at me and said, "Take me home." I sat and thought about it for a second, and then just decided, what the hell. She was probably close to 20 years older than me, but kind of sexy in that slutty cougar way. Merry Christmas to me. I closed up, left a note for our cleaning guy, counted out the drawers, and locked everything in the safe in the office. When I came back, Tara was waiting for me and we walked back to my place. We went in, I poured a couple of drinks, and we started making out. After a while, we got down to brass tacks and did the deed. We fell asleep for a second, and when we woke up, she asked if I was playful. And I said, sure, why not? Biggest mistake of my life. She went to her purse and pulled out some handcuffs, and I let her put them on me. I wasn't strapped down or anything, but just behind my back, and I thought, okay, kinky, and was only thinking about her taking me for a ride. But nope. In came 2 big dudes who proceeded to beat the living shit out of me. One was yelling at me for the keys to the bar, while the other just pummeled me. Then the guys blasting me left the room, and thank God the keys were in my jeans pocket, and somehow they had slid under my bed. All 3 of them left me bleeding on my bed as they went room to room looking for stuff to take. The 2 guys came back, beat me up some more, picked me up, and then stuffed me in my closet and told me to not come out until I had counted to 500. By this time, my eyes were swelling shut and I was scared as hell, and I heard them arguing about something, and then all 3 left. I waited for a while and then turned around to open the door to the closet as best I could. I got it open and I fell down on the floor and tried to get my hands in front of me, which I did after about a half hour of pain trying to do it. I crawled to my room, pulled on a pair of boxers, and then looked for my phone. It was gone. The sun was now up, and it was about 9 in the morning, and I really needed help. So, without doing anything else, I went outside, and not caring what I looked like, I went to the closest place I knew would be open, the corner store. I went in, and the few people that were there were giving me the biggest stares, and I just begged the woman behind the counter to call the police. She did, and actually got me a bottle of water. And the cops came, got me an ambulance ride, and that's when I caught a glimpse of what I looked like. You ever see the first Rocky? That's what I looked like. My face had been punched and kicked so much. I told them what had happened, and they had some tools that took off the handcuffs. At the infirmary, I got stitches over both my eyes, and then they did a full report of the night. My brother and sister came down after I called my family, and they drove out the hour to get me. I never did get my phone back. But before I got there, the police took me back to my house, and through blurry eyes I looked through all the rooms to see if anything was missing. The only things that were gone were one of my roomie's stereos, a really nice Onkyo setup, and my other roomie's Taylor guitar. That was it. Again, I never found my phone. My bro and sis got there, and sis drove me home with my brother driving my car back. The police never did find them, but they did recover both the stereo and the guitar. These morons pawned them right after Christmas in a town over from my college. They used fake IDs and never got caught, but at least we got our stuff back. As soon as my boss came back from his Florida trip, he drove to my house and was so sorry about what had happened. I mean, it wasn't his fault. Then he asked me what the woman looked like, and I told him. He shook his head. He immediately said he was going to call the police. turns out it was a second cousin of his who was nothing but trouble. I mean, obviously, duh. In the coming days, he tried to track her down, as did the police. But sadly, and I don't really feel too bad about this after the beating I took, they found her dead. Tara was a heroin junkie, and someone gave her what they call a hot dose. She had died on her front porch. I can't ever think that it wasn't those two guys who beat the hell out of me. Anyway, I healed up over time, ended up having a decent Christmas even though my eyes were just junk. We had a good New Year, and I kept my job until I graduated. My advice to anyone hearing this, no matter what your groin says, listen to your brain. Your dick is going to make bad decisions, but your brain can keep it in check. No sex is worth it. What did we see? Submitted by Max. For Christmas one year, I got a present that I never saw coming. My family owned a large chunk of wilderness in a rural part of downstate New York outside of the Catskills. My dad and both uncles bought it before I was born, and when a friend of theirs decided to sell his adjacent property, my dad bought it for me. I know. Pretty big present. But he got a big deal, and quite frankly, he had gotten a huge settlement from a car accident that he had been in the year before. I was so excited. I wanted to head out there as soon as I could and check out my new piece of land. It was 2012, and we had had a very mild winter up until that point. So I called my friend Chris. I got my canvas tent with the interior wood stove out and started planning for a trip 2 days after Christmas. I was literally a 22-year-old kid on Christmas, super pumped to head out, shoot some trap, explore, and just have some fun. We geared up the next day and then made the trip down from Clifton Park where we lived. We got there about 10 in the morning and immediately wandered around checking things out. I'd been on this part of the land before, but not really in a while, and so it kind of felt like it was all new, especially now that it was mine. We hiked through the woods and clearings, and we were so psyched about hunting that next year and fishing in the summer. I mean, it was so giddy, we already started planning a hunting trip with our girlfriends. We went back to my truck and cleared a space near it, and then set up the tent, chimney, and stove. And then it was fuel time, so we spent a couple of hours downing dead trees and chopping them up for firewood. I mean, mild winter does not mean warm, people, especially in the Northeast. Around 2 that afternoon, we took a break, had some lunch, and then hauled our clay thrower from the back of my truck. I'd mounted it to an old tire, and it wasn't the lightest thing in the world. We also hooked a chain up to 2 big old logs and dragged them to our campsite with my truck before we decided to have some fun. We stopped to catch our breath, and we heard a very strange sound. Not like a scream or a howl, this really odd noise. This probably sounds lame, but the closest thing I could pair it to is when one of those guys in the movie The Thing is turning into the Thing and he gives off that weird moan. I looked at Chris with the WTF face and he said, "Yeah, maybe it's just wind in the trees." It wasn't really that windy, but I said, "Well, maybe it's a bear." We immediately walked over to my truck and loaded our shotguns with slugs just in case. Then we got to building a fire ring after digging out a patch of dirt near the logs that we had just dragged over. "Max," Chris said, "let's just shoot some pigeons. Enough of this work." And that became a mantra for us. Enough of this work. We still say it to this day. We swapped slugs for shot and broke out the clays. We had a riot using the thrower and adding a hand thrower to make our contest more fun, doing the high and low thing. We stopped after a little while, just enjoying the silence, and that's when we heard that crazy moan again. It seemed farther away at this point, and I pointed out that if it was a bear, it was moving away, probably frightened by our shooting. We sat and listened for a little while longer, and then it was starting to get dark, so we decided to police up the shells, pulled our thrower under the back bumper of my truck, and then got a fire going outside as well as in the tent. If you've never tent camped with an interior wood stove, get one and do it. It keeps everything toasty warm all night. And mine had a water tank on the side for hot coffee first thing in the morning. Pretty cool. We cooked some chili and then sat around the campfire just shooting the breeze, putting back some Yinglings and talking about our plans. Then that moan came again. And then it happened more than once. By now it was around 10:30. We decided to head into the tent. We weren't scared, but we were a little unnerved, not knowing what that sound was coming from. We had our phones on us, but the signal was really spotty out there, and still is. If we did want to make a call, we would have to drive a couple of miles away and head up into the higher foothills of the mountains, or drive half an hour back to a little hamlet. As much as I wanted to call my dad, we both made the decision that driving after a few adult beverages was not a good idea, and we would just have to wait until morning to start asking questions. I put our cooler of food back under my tonneau cover of my truck, shut the tailgate, and then grabbed a couple of more bottles of nectar, and then we went into the tent. Chris broke out his cleaning kit, and in the glow of our lantern, we cleaned our shotguns. Every once in a while, we'd throw more wood into the stove. We were totally content. We finally decided to hit the sack, and I checked the stove, set my phone's alarm for 3 to stoke up the fire, and then we just talked into the night. I fell asleep, but Chris woke me up not long after. "There's something out there, man," he whispered after he was shaking me awake. "What?" I asked. "I don't know, but it's circling us in the truck. I can hear it crunching in the ground." The lantern we had was still burning low, so I turned it up and then crawled over to the tent flap. We hadn't noticed, but it had started lightly snowing. So I went out and looked around, but I didn't see anything with my flashlight, so I went back in. But right when I did, that moan came, and it was closer. It was really loud, and I kind of jumped forward into the tent. Chris closed the flap, and we just sat there in total silence, listening. After a while, there was a sound like a stick or something being dragged along the side of the tent. I looked around and saw something poking into the tent wall, and I yelled out, "Whoever you are, get back! We're armed, and you're on my land!" Or something stupid like that. Whatever it was pulled back, and then that moan came again. This time right outside the tent. Chris yelled, "Max!" and handed me my shotgun as I stared at the tent wall. I cycled and went for the tent flap. No one was going to scare me off my property. I burst outside and stood up looking around the tent. And there was nothing there. No footprints in the small amount of snow. No sign of anything. Chris came out and we just stood there waiting. Nothing for a half an hour, so we finally went back inside and fired up the stove. We were cold. I made some tea, and we just sat whispering about what the hell was going on. We decided to take shifts in case whatever or whoever was out there came back. Chris slept, I had another nectar, and I read a book, and we just changed things at 3. Nothing else happened that night. In the morning, we woke up and heard nothing. We just got to breakfast and planned to walk around and see if we could find a pond that I thought remembered being out there, trying to just put the entire events of the day before behind us. After finding the pond, around noon, we headed back to camp for some lunch. After a few minutes, I noticed something was wrong. The clay thrower wasn't under my back bumper anymore. It was gone. We looked all around our camp area, but it was just not there. It was gone. There were no other footsteps in the soft snow other than our tracks. We were starting to freak out a little bit. I looked around the edge of the woods and then saw something strange. The thrower was at the edge of the woods. We ran over to it, noticing that there were no tracks of any kind leading up to it. I mean, how the hell did it get all the way up there by itself? We wandered into the woods and looked around for any clues as to what was going on, but we didn't find anything. And then... the moan came back again from back near our campsite, and we ran back to see something that was way more disturbing than the thrower. My entire Colorado pickup truck had been turned around 180 degrees facing away from our camp and the way that I'd left it. No footprints. This was impossible. Now I was scared and confused. Chris said, "Max, we should just get out of here," and I agreed. We went and got the thrower and started to pack everything up. That's when Chris stopped, and his mouth was wide open. He was staring at the trees. I looked over to where he was looking at, and standing at the edge of the woods was what looked like a very tall human being, but completely black. I mean, no hair, just this tall black shape with its arms to its side. It wasn't a Bigfoot. I don't believe in any of that stuff. This was just a tall humanoid shape. I whispered, "Chris, let's just get the tent down and act like we haven't seen anything." Easier said than done. The stove was only warm at this point, so I wasn't worried about it wrecking the bed of my truck. I just wanted to get things packed up and get the hell out of there. We cleared up as quick as we could and got in the truck. The thing that we had seen, whatever it was gone. After we got in, I started heading out the path we had come down, and right before we made a turn to go between the trees on both sides to get back to the dirt road that we had to go back to the hamlet, I looked back, and there were 3 of those dark shapes standing where our campsite had been. Chris noticed me looking back, and he turned, fumbled for his phone to try and take a picture, but by the time he did, they were gone. To this day, I don't know what those things were, what those moans were about, and I've never seen them again. Again, I don't believe in Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or whatever, and they didn't look anything like that. They were just these tall, black, humanoid shapes. When we got home, I told my dad about it, but he didn't believe us, so we just decided to shut up about it. I've been out there all the time with my kids and friends since then, but those strange black human-like things have never returned. When I first thought that getting that land was the greatest Christmas present ever, now I think the fact that those things have never showed up again is really the best Christmas present I've ever received. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you're celebrating the holidays like I am, I hope you are all ready for it and enjoying your time, and that you do enjoy your holidays and hopefully some off time from any work that you're doing. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you would like me to narrate on my channel, email unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. I have a number of stories that people have sent in that I will have in another volume, but I kind of skipped ahead because these were more oriented around the holidays, and I thought I would just do that first and then get to the other good stuff in the new year. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Leave a comment down below. I do my best to reply to everyone. Follow me on social media. All of the links to that are in the description below. Everyone, be careful this holiday season, no matter what it is that you're doing, and no matter what it is that you're celebrating. I wish you the happiest of holidays. And remember, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door. Merry Christmas, everyone.